Everyone watched the billionaire's fiancé destroy the maid's toddler school project, until the billionaire walked in. This little girl walked into the room unnoticed, but nobody could ignore her after that happened. It was supposed to be just another glamorous night at the Whitmore estate. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and guests dressed like royalty. Nobody looked twice at the 3-year-old girl standing quietly by the kitchen doors, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in her tiny hands. She wasn't a guest. She was the maid's daughter. But when the billionaire's fiancé spotted that paper, something cold flickered in her eyes. What she did next in front of 200 guests would leave the entire mansion in stunned silence. Because the moment she tore that paper apart, laughing, she had no idea who was standing behind her. And when he saw what was written on it, nothing in that mansion would ever be the same again. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we dive into tonight's story, drop a comment and let me know. Where are you watching from tonight? I love seeing where this community comes from all around the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we bring you emotional, heart-touching stories every single week. And trust me, you're going to want to stay until the very end tonight, because the final twist in this one is something you will not see coming. Hey, let's begin. But nobody in that ballroom knew what was about to unfold in the next 60 seconds. The Whitmore estate glittered like something out of a dream. Marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers, and the scent of fresh roses drifted through air filled with soft piano music and quiet, wealthy laughter. Tonight was the engagement party of Ethan Whitmore, 34 years old, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country, and his fiancée, Camille Reyes, 30 years old, a woman known as much for her sharp beauty as her sharper tongue. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled beneath the golden lights, sipping champagne, admiring the towering ice sculptures shaped like swans. It was the kind of party where diamonds outnumbered smiles. In the corner of the kitchen, away from all that glitter, a woman named Marisol Vega wiped sweat from her brow as she balanced a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She had worked for the Whitmore family for almost 2 years now, quiet, humble, always polite. Beside her, tucked safely behind a stack of linen napkins, sat her 3-year-old daughter Sophia. Sophia had big brown eyes and 2 little braids her mother had tied that morning with trembling, tired hands. She wasn't supposed to be there. But Marisol's babysitter had cancelled last minute, and with no one else to watch her, she had no choice but to bring Sophia along, hiding her safely in a corner where she wouldn't be noticed. "Stay right here, mi amor," Marisol whispered, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "Don't move. Mommy will be right back." Sophia nodded obediently, hugging a small folded piece of paper to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. It was a drawing. She had spent all morning working on it with crayons that were nearly worn down to nothing. A picture of her mother, smiling, wearing wings like an angel, surrounded by yellow suns and red hearts. Underneath, in shaky toddler handwriting her mother had helped guide, it said, "My mommy is my hero." Sophia had wanted to give it to her mother as a surprise tonight, tucked between the trays and the busy chaos of work. She had waited all week to give it to her. But little Sophia didn't understand grand parties. She didn't understand invisible lines between them and us. All she understood was that her mother worked very hard, and she loved her more than anything in the world. As the hours passed, curiosity got the better of her. The music was so beautiful. The lights were so bright. Sophia peeked out from behind the linen napkins, her small feet quietly carrying her toward the ballroom entrance. That's when she saw her. Camille Reyes, dressed in a shimmering emerald gown, stood near the grand staircase, laughing loudly with a group of guests, a champagne glass balanced delicately between manicured fingers. She was beautiful in the way ice is beautiful, stunning but cold enough to burn anyone who touched it. Sophia didn't know who she was. She only knew the woman was smiling, and smiling people usually seemed friendly. Clutching her drawing tightly, Sophia took a few hesitant steps forward. "Excuse me," she whispered, tugging gently at the hem of Camille's dress. The laughter around them stopped. Camille turned, her smile fading the instant her eyes landed on the small child standing at her feet. Her gaze swept over Sophia's simple cotton dress, her scuffed little shoes, her braided hair, every detail screaming, "Not one of us." "Whose child is this?" Camille asked sharply, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. A few heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a chill. Sophia, sensing the sudden tension but not fully understanding it, held up her drawing with both hands, her voice small and hopeful. "I made this. Do you want to see?" For a brief moment, something almost human flickered across Camille's face. But then her eyes caught the eyes of a few society women nearby, women whose opinions mattered more to her than kindness ever would. And in that instant, Camille made a choice that would change everything. "This isn't a daycare, sweetheart," she said coldly, snatching the drawing from Sophia's tiny hands. "Someone needs to control the help's children." The words cut through the air like glass. Sophia's lower lip trembled. "That's for my mommy," she whispered, reaching up. Camille held the drawing higher, out of reach, examining it with mock amusement as a few guests chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or look away. "How adorable," Camille said, her voice dripping with condescension. "A little drawing from a little maid's daughter." Then without warning she tore it. Once. The pieces fluttered to the marble floor like broken wings. Sophia stood frozen, her small chest rising and falling rapidly, tears welling in her wide brown eyes as she stared down at the torn scraps of paper. Pieces of the only gift she had for her mother, pieces of hours of careful, loving work. "No," she whispered, dropping to her knees, trying desperately to gather the torn pieces with tiny, shaking fingers. "No, no, no." The room had gone eerily quiet. And that's when a deep, familiar voice cut through the silence like thunder. "What is going on here?" Every head turned. Standing at the top of the staircase, his expression unreadable, was Ethan Whitmore. And he had seen everything. What Ethan did next left his own fiancée speechless. Ethan descended the staircase slowly, each step deliberate. His sharp eyes locked on the scene before him. The torn paper scattered across the marble floor, the small trembling girl on her knees trying to piece it back together, and Camille standing above her, champagne glass still in hand, an uneasy smile forming on her lips. "Ethan, darling," Camille said quickly, smoothing her dress. "It's nothing. Just a little mess." The maid's daughter wandered off. "I asked what happened," Ethan said again. His voice quiet but firm enough to silence the entire ballroom. Nobody moved. Sophia, still on the floor, looked up at him with tear-filled eyes, two torn pieces of paper clutched desperately in her small fists. She didn't know who this tall man was. She only knew he had a kind face, even though his eyes looked troubled. Ethan crouched down, ignoring the 200 guests watching in stunned silence, ignoring his fiancée's tightening jaw, and gently reached for the torn pieces. "Can I see?" he asked softly. Sophia hesitated, then slowly handed him the fragments. He carefully arranged them on his palm, a drawing, unmistakably a child's drawing, of a woman with wings surrounded by suns and hearts. And beneath it, in careful guided handwriting, "My mommy is my hero." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. He remembered suddenly and vividly a moment from his own childhood, a similar drawing he once made for his mother before she passed away when he was only 7. He remembered how much it had meant to give her something made purely from love, and how devastating it would have been if someone had destroyed it in front of him. "Who did this?" he asked quietly, his eyes lifting toward Camille. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Ethan, please," Camille said, forcing a laugh. "It's just paper. I didn't realize it was some sort of masterpiece." "She tore it," Sophia whispered suddenly, pointing a small finger at Camille, her voice trembling but honest. "She said mean things about my mommy." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Camille's face flushed red. She's a child, Ethan, she's confused. I'm not confused, Sophia said, her tiny voice surprisingly steady despite her tears. You said my mommy is the help. You said I don't belong here. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan slowly stood, still holding the torn pieces of the drawing gently in his hands, and turned to face his fiancée directly, his jaw tight. Is that true? He asked. Camille's confident mask cracked for just a second before she recovered it. Ethan, you're really going to make a scene over the maid's brat and her little crayon drawing? In front of everyone. The words landed like a slap. Several guests visibly winced. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances. Somewhere near the back someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "Her name," he said slowly, "is Sophia. And her mother Marisol has worked in this house for 2 years without a single complaint, without a single moment of disrespect toward anyone, including you." Just then, Marisol came rushing out from the kitchen, having heard the commotion, her face pale with panic when she saw her daughter on the floor, surrounded by strangers, tears streaming down her tiny cheeks. "Sophia!" she gasped, rushing forward and scooping her daughter into her arms. "Oh my God, baby, are you okay?" "I'm so sorry, sir, she wasn't supposed to." "You have nothing to apologize for," Ethan said gently, his tone completely different now, warm, sincere. "Your daughter did nothing wrong." Marisol looked between Ethan and Camille, sensing the tension thick enough to cut with a knife, confusion and fear swimming in her eyes. "What happened?" Nobody answered right away. Sophia, still sniffling into her mother's shoulder, spoke first. "The pretty lady tore my drawing, Mommy. The one I made for you." Marisol's breath caught. Her eyes turned toward Camille, disbelief washing over her tired face. "You tore her drawing?" Camille rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed at being cornered. "It was an accident. Children are dramatic, that's all." But Ethan was no longer listening to her. He was staring at the torn pieces still resting in his palm, his thumb gently tracing over the crayon letters. "My mommy is my hero," and something inside him, something he had buried for years since his own mother's death, quietly began to crack open. "Marisol," he said softly, "take Sophia somewhere quiet. I'll handle this." As Marisol carried her daughter away, throwing one last uncertain glance over her shoulder, Ethan turned to face Camille, and the entire room of 200 guests, with an expression none of them had ever seen on him before. "We need to talk," he said. "Now." But what neither of them realized was that this wasn't just about a torn drawing. It was about to unravel something far bigger, a secret Camille had been hiding for months, one that was about to come crashing down in front of everyone. What Ethan discovered in the next 10 minutes would shatter everything he thought he knew. He led Camille into the private study just off the main hallway, closing the heavy oak door behind them, muffling the murmurs of the curious guests still buzzing outside. "Ethan, I don't understand why you're this upset over a piece of paper," Camille said, crossing her arms, her tone shifting from embarrassment to defensiveness. "It's a drawing. Children make hundreds of them." "It's not about the drawing," Ethan said quietly, staring at the torn pieces still in his hand. "It's about what it represents. And it's about who you really are." Camille scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." "I saw your face," Ethan continued, his voice low but sharp. "Before you tore it. You didn't do it by accident. You wanted those women outside to see you humiliate that little girl. You wanted to prove something." Camille's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Ethan sat down slowly on the edge of his desk, rubbing his temples, exhaustion and disappointment washing over his face. "Do you know what today is?" he asked suddenly. Camille blinked, caught off guard by the shift. "What?" "Today would have been my mother's 62nd birthday," Ethan said quietly. "She passed away when I was 7. Cancer. The last thing I ever gave her was a drawing just like that one. A little house with the three of us standing outside it. Me, her, and my father. I never got to see her face when she opened it. She died the night before her birthday. The room fell into heavy silence. I never told you that, Ethan continued, his voice breaking slightly. I never told anyone. But watching that little girl on the floor, trying to piece together something she made with love, I felt 7 years old again. Camille's expression flickered, something that almost looked like genuine remorse crossing her face for the briefest moment. But it vanished quickly, replaced by frustration. Ethan, I'm sorry about your mother, truly. But you can't compare a random child's drawing to something so personal to you. That's exactly the problem, Ethan said, standing up abruptly. You don't see people, Camille. You see status. You see who matters and who doesn't. And tonight, in front of everyone, you showed me exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. That's not fair, Camille snapped. You have no idea the pressure I'm under, trying to fit into your world, trying to be perfect for these people. These people don't matter, Ethan interrupted. What matters is how you treat someone who can't do anything for you. And you failed that test tonight in front of 200 witnesses. Camille's eyes narrowed, her composure cracking further. You're really going to end things over this? Over some maid's kid? The words hung in the air like poison. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, something cold settling behind his eyes. Her name is Sophia, he said quietly. And you just confirmed everything I needed to know. He turned toward the door, but Camille grabbed his arm. Wait, she said, her voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. Ethan, please think about this rationally. We've been together for 2 years. We have a wedding planned. Everyone knows about us. Think about the embarrassment, the scandal. I am thinking rationally, Ethan said, gently removing her hand from his arm. For the first time in a long time. He opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. But as he walked past the kitchen, he noticed something that stopped him cold. Marisol was sitting on a small stool, Sophia curled up asleep in her lap, exhaustion evident on the young mother's face. And clutched in Sophia's tiny hand, even in sleep, was the taped-together remains of her torn drawing, carefully pieced back together with kitchen tape by her mother. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them for a long moment. There was something about the image, the quiet dignity of a mother who worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter, and a child who, despite everything, still clung to something made with love, that struck him harder than any business deal or high society event ever had. He didn't know it yet, but that quiet moment in the kitchen doorway was about to change the entire direction of his life. Because what he was about to learn about Marisol Vega, and the real reason she had come to work for his family 2 years ago, would reveal a secret that connected them in a way neither of them could have ever imagined. But nothing could have prepared Ethan for what he discovered the next morning. Unable to sleep after the events of the party, Ethan sat in his study long after the guests had gone home, staring at Sophia's taped-together drawing, now resting carefully on his desk. Something about it nagged at him. Not just the emotional weight of the moment, but something oddly familiar about Marisol herself, something he couldn't quite place. At dawn, he asked his assistant to quietly pull Marisol's original employment file, not out of suspicion, but out of a strange, persistent curiosity he couldn't shake. What he found stopped his heart. Marisol Vega had applied for the housekeeping position exactly 2 years ago, 1 month after his mother's old family friend, Diane Foster, had unexpectedly passed away. Diane had been the only person who stayed close to Ethan's family after his mother's death, a woman his mother had trusted deeply, someone Ethan vaguely remembered visiting their home when he was a child. Attached to the employment file was an old reference letter, handwritten, slightly yellowed with age. It was signed by Diane Foster. The letter described Marisol not just as a hard-working, honest young woman, but as someone Diane had personally mentored for years, someone she trusted as if she were family. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he read further. There was a small, faded note attached to the bottom of the letter, one that seemed to have been added almost as an afterthought. Please look after her the way you once looked after me, Ethan. She reminds me so much of your mother's kindness. Ethan sat back in his chair, stunned. He had never made the connection before. He had approved Marisol's hiring 2 years ago through his HR department without ever personally reviewing her file, a routine hire among dozens of household staff. He had no idea that the woman working quietly in his kitchen every day had been personally vouched for by one of the last living connections to his late mother. He immediately called Marisol into his office that morning. She arrived nervously, smoothing her apron, clearly unsure why she had been summoned, worry evident on her tired face. Sir, if this is about last night, I promise Sophia won't be a distraction again. I'll find someone to watch her eye. Sit down, Marisol, Ethan said gently, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She hesitated before sitting, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Ethan slid the old reference letter across the desk toward her. Marisol's eyes widened the moment she recognized the handwriting. That's Miss Diane's letter, she whispered, tears immediately welling in her eyes. She wrote that for me before she passed. I didn't know it was still on file. Did you know Diane was close to my family? Ethan asked quietly. Marisol nodded slowly. She used to talk about your mother all the time. She said your mother was the kindest woman she ever knew. She used to tell me stories about her, about how she treated everyone with respect, no matter their status. Marisol paused, wiping her eyes. She said if I ever needed work, I should apply here, because your family valued kindness above everything else. I didn't know if it was true until last night. Ethan felt a lump forming in his throat. I'm sorry about what happened, he said. Truly sorry. Sophia should have never been treated that way in my home. She's just a baby, Marisol said softly, her voice trembling. She doesn't understand why people can be so cruel. I try to protect her from it, but I can't always be there. Ethan nodded slowly, glancing again at Sophia's taped-together drawing still resting on his desk. Marisol, he said carefully, I want to ask you something and I want you to answer honestly. She looked up uncertain. Yes, sir. Diane once told my mother something before she passed, Ethan said, choosing his words carefully. She said she found someone special, someone who reminded her of a promise she made a long time ago. Do you know what that means? Marisol's face went pale. She hesitated, glancing down at her trembling hands. I think it's time I told you something, sir. Something about my mother, and why Diane really took me in all those years ago. Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding. I'm listening, he said quietly. And what Marisol was about to reveal would connect their two families in a way neither of them ever imagined. A secret buried for over 2 decades, one that would explain why fate had brought Sophia into that ballroom on that exact night. What Marisol revealed next left Ethan speechless. My mother worked for your family too, Marisol said quietly, her voice trembling. A long time ago. Before you were born. Ethan's eyes widened. What? She was your mother's personal assistant, Marisol continued, wiping tears from her cheeks. For almost 5 years. They weren't just employer and employee, sir. They were close friends. Your mother used to say my mother was the only person who understood her before the money changed everything around her. Ethan sat in stunned silence, memories flooding back. Vague recollections of a woman's laughter in his childhood home, a woman whose face he could no longer clearly picture, but whose warmth he somehow still remembered. My mother passed away when I was young too, Marisol continued. Complications during childbirth, with my younger brother. Diane was there for both losses, for your mother's passing and for mine. She always said the two of us were connected by something bigger than coincidence. Why didn't you say anything? Ethan asked softly. Why keep this hidden all this time? Marisol lowered her eyes. Because I didn't want special treatment, sir. I didn't want anyone to think I only got this job because of who my mother once knew. I wanted to earn my place here through my own hard work, not through old connections. Ethan felt something shift deep inside his chest, a profound respect for the quiet dignity of the woman sitting across from him. Diane's final wish, Marisol added softly, was that our families would somehow find their way back to each other one day. I think last night, Sophia found that connection before either of us even realized what was happening. Ethan looked down again at the taped-together drawing on his desk. My mommy is my hero, and felt tears sting his own eyes for the first time in years. She's an incredible little girl, he said quietly. She reminds me of the kind of person my mother always hoped I would grow up to be. Just then, a soft knock interrupted them. Sophia peeked her head shyly around the door, having wandered from the playroom where she usually waited during her mother's shifts. Mommy, she said softly, then noticed Ethan and froze, unsure if she was in trouble. It's okay, sweetheart, Ethan said gently, kneeling down to her level. Come here. Sophia hesitated before slowly approaching, her small hand still clutching the taped drawing. I fixed it, she said quietly, holding it up. Mommy taped it. It's a little broken, but it's still there. Ethan took the drawing gently, studying it with newfound emotion. It's beautiful, Sophia. Truly beautiful. Do you like my mommy's wings? She asked, pointing to the crayon angel. I gave her wings because she's my hero. She works so hard and never complains, even when her feet hurt. Ethan glanced at Marisol, whose eyes were now overflowing with quiet tears. She is a hero, Ethan said softly, meeting Marisol's gaze. One of the bravest people I know. That evening, as news of what happened at the engagement party spread quietly among the household staff and eventually beyond, whispers began circulating about Camille's cruelty, and about Ethan's unexpected kindness toward the maid and her daughter. But nobody, not even Ethan himself, expected what would happen next. Because the following morning, Camille wasn't done fighting for her position, and she was about to make one final, desperate move that would expose the true depth of her character in front of everyone who mattered most to Ethan. What happened next shocked the entire Whitmore estate, and finally revealed who Camille truly was. 3 days after the party, Ethan called a private meeting at the estate to formally discuss the end of his engagement with Camille, along with his legal team, in the presence of a few close family members and advisors. Camille arrived dressed impeccably, composed, clearly having rehearsed her approach. She sat calmly across from Ethan, folding her hands neatly. I think we can resolve this like adults, she said smoothly. I'm willing to overlook this misunderstanding if you are. There's no misunderstanding to overlook, Ethan said calmly. I've made my decision. Camille's composure cracked slightly. Ethan, think about your reputation. Think about what people will say. I have thought about it, Ethan replied. And I've realized something important. The people whose opinions I actually care about are exactly the kind of people you humiliated that night. Camille's eyes narrowed. This is absurd. Over a maid's daughter. Over basic human decency, Ethan corrected firmly. Over who you become when you think no one important is watching. Desperate, Camille turned to Ethan's lawyer. Surely there's a prenuptial arrangement that protects my interests here. There is, the lawyer replied evenly, but it includes a clause specifically regarding public conduct unbecoming of the family name. Multiple witnesses corroborated the incident at the party. Camille's face went white. Realizing she had lost, her mask finally shattered completely. You're really going to throw away everything we built for some housekeeper and her brat? She snapped, her voice rising, all pretense of composure gone. The room fell silent. Ethan stood slowly, his expression calm but resolute. That housekeeper, he said quietly, is connected to my family in ways you'll never understand, Camille. And that little girl showed more grace and courage in that ballroom than you've shown in the 2 years I've known you." Camille opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. "I think it's time you left," Ethan said simply. Security quietly escorted a fuming, humiliated Camille from the estate. Her engagement, her reputation, and her carefully constructed image crumbling around her in real time. Weeks later, life at the Whitmore estate had transformed quietly but profoundly. Ethan personally ensured Marisol and Sophia moved into a comfortable guest cottage on the property, insisting it was the least he could do given the long hidden history between their families. He established a college fund for Sophia's future, and slowly, warmly, an unexpected friendship began blossoming between the once lonely billionaire and the quiet little girl who had unknowingly changed his life. One evening, months later, Ethan sat on the porch of the cottage, watching as Sophia excitedly showed him a brand new drawing. No longer torn, no longer fragile, but bright, colorful, and whole. It was a picture of 3 people this time. Sophia, her mother, and Ethan, standing together beneath a bright yellow sun. "This is my family now," Sophia announced proudly, holding it up for him to see. Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion as he studied the drawing, memories of his own childhood colliding gently with this unexpected new chapter of his life. "I would be honored to be part of your family, Sophia," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Marisol, watching from the doorway, wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by how far they had come from that painful night in the ballroom. What began as a single act of cruelty had, in the end, uncovered a hidden connection between 2 families bound by loss, love, and quiet resilience, and revealed that sometimes the smallest, most vulnerable voices carry the power to change everything. Because in the end, kindness isn't measured by status or wealth. It's measured by how we treat those who can offer us nothing in return. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment telling us your favorite moment, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this every week. See you in the next one.